Welcome back to the next video. Here we are in video 10, and now we are expanding our getting all our users endpoint, so our paginating endpoint, with another filter for the username. So we can now filter by username and paginate through the results with page and with limit, whatever we want to do. And what we can do with this later is like we can have a real-time search in our front end where you just type in some characters, for example Thomas, and then you get shown all the usernames or all the users that are having this part of a string in their username. So the structure of the video is as follows, or as always. We will first have a look at our video outcome, then have a look at our story, then we implement our story, and then we will close it later. So in this video we are expanding our users endpoint. So that's a paginating endpoint which takes the parameters or query parameters page and limit. So we have these two here. And so we can limit, for example, the results to 1 and our page to 0, and we use or we search for the username field or what contains it. So we can see we have here Felix1 returned, this object, the user. And for example, we could also limit this to 2 users, so we get both returned, or we can also limit this to 3, and then we get all returned here. We could also say we want to paginate to the first page and limit it to 1, and then we can go to our second page. So you see this is working, or we can say we search for the username Thomas or To, or you can say Thomas, and then you get always the result. So we have now a user's endpoint that returns all the users, and you can paginate through this and filter it with username, with page, and with limit. So now we are in video 10, and let's have a look at the story first. So we say we want to be able to filter and paginate with our endpoint that we have, we get all users, and we want to filter now by username. So as a technical lead, I want to be able to add the new query parameter username to the get all users paginating request, so I can filter by username, and the acceptance criteria are I want a new query parameter username for the get all users request, and paginating should also be possible with the parameters limit and page. So why we do this? Because later in the front end we want to have a search where we can search a user by username. And so if we have type in the username test, for example, then we want to have displayed all users with username test in it. And what we also want to do, for example, if there are 105 users, then we want them to have also paging. So then we will be able to display 10 on every side and navigate through those pages. So let's have this in doing and start. Let's start by switching our branch. So we can say here we are on branch develop and everything is clean. And now we want to switch to our new feature branch. So we use git-flow and we say git-flow feature start, and we name it video 10 like our video that we are doing now. Then we can see that we are having a new feature branch based on develop here. Where is it? Here, created based on develop, and now we can start with our feature. So first thing that we can do is we can start our backend. So we go into our API folder and say npm run start dev and run our start script, and then we can start Postman and have a look at it. So you can see here, when we hit our endpoint, we get our users back, and we have our query parameters, page and limit, and so we can set these two, and then we see we get 2 items with ID 6 and 3, and you could say we have total pages 7, so we could go to the next page, and you remember we have here ID 6 and 3, if we go to page 3, then we get the next users with ID 9 and 10. And so we can do this all day long. And so what we want is, we want to have here the new query parameter username. And this could be, for example, Thomas. And then I want to have every user return that having this string here in its username. So we can start by implementing in our controller this query parameter. So we are on this here, so we can make this a little bit more readable. So we have our query parameters page and limit as before, and now we want to add some more. So one more So what we do, we make a new query parameter. And we name it username. And then we just say username, it's of type string. So we have to close this here. And this should not be closed. So this seems fine. And so we can just console log this and see if we get it. So you see if it's compiling, and then we hit again our endpoint here. You see we have our username now specified. And then we see it's logged here, so we get it in our backend. So the next thing that we have to do is we have to go in our service and use this. So we see in our paginate we have only our page and our limit specified and the route. And we now also need our username. So what we can do is we can have a look for nest.js-paginate, this package that we used for paginating all the users. But as I remember, there is no option to filter the username or something like this. So we can see, now you're just giving in the query builder on the options you can see here. In the paginate method, they are just having limit, page and route. So what we can do now is we can go into our service here and we can add a new method and we can call this paginate filter by username or whatever you like, and we want to return an observable and we want to have the same type as above here in our paginate, so that our front end, that there don't need to be any changes. So this has to be the same. And then we can have as inputs, we say we want to have options like above, the iPagination object, iPagination options. And we want also to have our username. So we can, or our user, we can say user from type user. So we can later probably adjust this. So we not just filter by username, but also by age or by normal name or by email, whatever we want. So we have this, and then we need our return. And here we can use again our from, and we say this user repository dot find, and we can see here find entities that match given options, find and count, finds entities that match given find options, also counts all entities that match given conditions but ignores pagination settings. So you have to see, so that's what we need, because we want, you remember we are not just getting these users, but we also at the meter. We also get the metadata. So we see here the total items, 13. So we need this because we want to still return this number, how many items are being found from that type. So if you type in Thomas and then it counts and there are 13 users that are having this username in kind of way, then we want to have this number so we can add this later. So we will use find and count, and then we can give it some options, and we can just look what it takes. So we can take or we can skip, and this is offset paginated where from entities should be taken. So this is like paginating, so we can say we want to skip the first 5 users that we get. So for example, if we say we want to have page 2, then we can say we want to skip, and we have a page size of 5. Then we can just say we want to skip the first 5 users and get the next 5. So what we want to do is we can say skip, and this is our options.page, so which page we have, and we just multiply it with our limit, or if nothing is specified, we just take 0. And then we can also say take how many entities should be taken. So this is just our limit. So how many users do we want to return to them? And so we say it's 10, or if it's specified, then we use this thing. Then we already do this in our controller. So in our controller, if there's no number specified, we set it to 10. So this is just the fallback. So another thing that we can set is we can order our results, and here we can also give some options, and you can see now we have here all our properties from our user. So we can say email, or from our user entity, or we can say ID, and we want it to be ascending, so that it counts up. So it starts with the user with the lowest ID, and then, so for example, user ID with 1 is at first, user ID with 2 is second, and so on. Then we can use our select statement. So what properties from the user we want to return. So we want to have returned our ID. We want to have returned, and this is actually an array, I think. Yeah, so you see now we are getting code completion, and we can say ID, we can say name, we can say username, we can say email, we can say role. And we don't want to say password, because then, like here, we would have to remove it later, because we don't want to return it to our user or to the front end. But so we can just say we don't want this at all. And then the next thing, or the important thing that we need, is our where clause. And this also takes in an array. And here we can specify multiple of this, but we will just need one. So what we want to do is we want to query our before username. And there we want to use, or we want to be able to have so we have here some find options. And if I search for then you can see this is like, for example, I want a user, if I have, let's go to our regex. If I have a user with the username Thomas123 and I search for Thomas, then I want to have this user returned. So I want a full search, and I don't want him just to be returned like this, but also with this. And so what we can say here is we can want to have and here the percentage are like wildcards, so there can be every character. So we can just put this in like this. So we say and then we use our string here, and we can say, so this is our wildcard. Then we use our value, our username that we get from our controller, and then we add another wildcard. So and this should return all the users or 2 objects that we need. And so we want to pipe the outcome and map it, because we want to return an observable, and map will return an observable. It takes an observable in and it takes an observable out. So we pipe here this observable, then we in the map we say we are getting the users, and we get total users. Let's see if everything is right. Yeah, and so what we need to do now is, because our library, or what we were using here, our package with the paginate is not working here, so we have to construct the same object like here, So we can say we want to have a user's pageable object, and this should be of type pagination user. And now we have to fill this, and this is also what we want to return. So we want to return users pageable. So all the error now goes away, because now we are returning an object from pagination user, like here we said, and it's an observable. So now we can, like it says here, we are missing properties, so we have to fill it up. So we say the first thing is items, so we want here our users. The second thing is links. And the third thing are our metadata. And now we have to fill this. So links we have first, and this is just our options.route. And then we add our limit. Then we have our previous. So we can fill this later. The next. So this should be limit is the same, and then we have our page, and this should be like the next page, so we can just say options.page +1, and then we have our last page, and here we can just say copy this, and how can we do this? So we have our limit, and we have the total users. So we can just say, let's fill it up. So if we have like 100 users, and we have a limit for 5, then we can say the last page would be our 20th page, so we can just say here our total users divided, not divided, what's the English word, whatever you know what this means, through page, and then we get our page. And then we have our metadata. And here we can say current page. And this is just our options.page. Then we have our item count. These are the users that we have on this page right now displayed. So it could be 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. So this is our users length. So you see this would be how many users are here. This is just the length of our user array here. Then we have items per page, how many items we want to have displayed. And here we can just use our options.limit. Then we have our total items. And these are just our total users, so this is just the number. And then we have our total pages are here, let's say math.ceil, so we want to round it up always to a full number. We can say total users divide whatever to options.limit. So now when we have 100 users, then we divide this by the limit of 5. And then we have our total pages. So this would be the same here. And we can say here math sale. So this should be returning now our users pageable here, our observable. And so what we have to do now in our controller is we have to say, or we can say there are very many options. We could say if our username is null, and this is barely the same like if you say if username null or username is undefined. Sorry, I forgot this. Then we want to return the normal pagination that we had. So without our username, but in our else case, we want to return our user service dot paginateFilterByUsername, and then we can just add like our options that we need. So we say the same that we are having here. And then we need a second one. Just let me clear this up. And here we need our we have our object from user, and there we have our property username. So we can see now, or hopefully, if we have here our Thomas, then we just get returned users with the username Thomas in it. So we see there are 0, and I think it's type sensitive or not. Let's see. So let's go into it and look if we did something wrong. So we have our ID, name, email, we are ordering it, we have our limit and everything. We map our users, our total users. Let's say console.log users. So we have an empty array here. Let's look why this is. And just to try out, if we go with skip to 0, this is helping. So we are not skipping any users. Yeah, so we see now this works. So then just console log our options and look why, what are we getting here. So if we just return or make this request, then we have a page 1 and limit 10. So we would skip here the first 10 users. So this is not good. So we have to change this here. So if we say here and page 0, then this should work, yeah. So we will just let this be with 1. So we just have to, here, if you implement it in the front end, then you have to be aware of what this is doing. So we can say if you want to just paginate, then we also always need our number 1 page, our first page. This will be the first thing that you see if you open the front end. So it's not loading it by username search, but the normal search displaying all users. And if you specify a username for searching, then you will need to have set our page parameter. So this one is just applying if there's nothing. And this limit also, if there's nothing, then we have 1 and then we have 10. So if you add here 0 in our query parameter, so page 0 here, you see it, then you will get returned all users with username Felix in it. And you see here, Felix is here, and then you have 3, the 2, the 1, and so on. You could go to page 0, then there should be nothing, you see. But if we go to page 0 and we make the limit to 1, then we should just get 1 user on the second page. So this should be all. And now the next thing is to implement this in the front end. This will be done in our next video. So we now can remove our console logs. Make this a little bit smaller. Remove this console log here. Yeah. And this is just one way to do it. You have very many ways. And so always here you can improve it. So the next thing that we want to do is we can commit this. So we add all our files. We commit with a commit message, and we say V-10 added filtering and paginating with username. And then we can git push this, and we set our upstream branch. And then we can already say git-flow feature finish to merge it back into our develop branch. Just give it a moment. And now we can say git push and push our develop branch to our repository, to GitLab. And then we can check in our Trello if we have done everything. So we have our new query parameter username. And we can paginate, and also with the previous parameters, limits and page. So we can move this to done and finish this all up.